Screw It, Let's Do It. Lessons in Life, by Richard Branson. Introduction. Imagine being alone. You're floating in a tiny capsule, miles above the icy Atlantic Ocean. The man who was just flying with you, your co-pilot, has jumped into the churning sea below, and without his weight, your hot air balloon is shooting upwards, out of control. You're rising higher and higher, into the clouds, with only about an hour of fuel left. When it runs out, you will fall. The radio is dead. What do? In that moment of absolute crisis, what goes through your mind? For the man in that capsule, a thought surfaced, a guiding principle that had defined his entire life. It wasn't about giving up. It was about what was still possible. He told himself, while I am alive, I can still do something. Something will turn up. That man was Richard Branson, and that harrowing experience is just one small chapter in a life lived at full throttle. He is the maverick billionaire, the adventurer, the founder of the Virgin Empire, a global brand that has ventured into music, airlines, trains, and even space travel. But how did he do it? How did a boy who struggled with dyslexia and was told he'd either end up in prison or a millionaire achieve such extraordinary success? The answer lies in a simple, powerful, and slightly cheeky philosophy, captured in the title of his book, Screw It, Let's Do It. This isn't your typical business manual filled with charts and theories. This is a blueprint for living. It's a collection of raw, honest lessons learned from a life of breathtaking risks, spectacular failures, and monumental triumphs. Today, we are going to unpack that philosophy. By the time we're done, you'll understand the mindset that allows ordinary people to achieve extraordinary things. You'll learn why having fun is the most serious business strategy of all, why challenges are the fuel for growth, and why the most important step you can ever take is always the first one. This is more than a book summary. It's an invitation to live a bigger, bolder life. Book summary. The story of Richard Branson doesn't begin in a boardroom. It begins with a 4-year-old boy being told by his mother to find his own way home across the fields. It sounds tough, maybe even a little harsh, but for his mother, Eve, it was a crucial lesson in self-reliance. She was teaching her son to stand on his own 2 feet, to think for himself, and to see life not as a set of rules to be followed, but as a series of challenges to be overcome. This philosophy was the bedrock of his upbringing. Another time, on a cold winter morning, she woke him up, gave him a packed lunch, and sent him on a 50-mile bike ride to the coast, a journey that would take him all day and night. When he returned, exhausted but proud, there wasn't a huge celebration. Instead, his mother simply said, "Well done, Ricky. Now run along. The vicar wants you to chop some logs for him." The lesson was clear. Accomplish one challenge, and then look for the next. Life is about moving forward, always. This mindset, that anything is possible if you just try, was best exemplified by his mother herself. During the war, she wanted to be a pilot, a job reserved for men. Did that stop her? Not for a second. She put on a leather jacket, tucked her hair under a helmet, spoke in a deep voice, and got the job. When she later wanted to be an air hostess but didn't speak Spanish or have nursing training as required, she simply charmed her way onto the list and learned on the job. She never saw obstacles. She only saw detours. Her motto could have been the very title of this book. This spirit of adventure ran deep in the family. His granddad's cousin was the famous explorer Captain Robert Scott, the man who dared to race to the South Pole. People told Scott it couldn't be done, but he believed it could. Though he reached the pole second and tragically died on the return journey, he is remembered not for his failure, but for his immense courage. He aimed for the impossible and nearly achieved it. These early lessons in courage and self-reliance shaped the young Branson. At school, he struggled. Dyslexia made reading and writing a constant battle, and his teachers often mistook his difficulty for laziness. But instead of accepting defeat, he found a workaround. He trained himself to memorize everything, developing a powerful memory that would later become one of his greatest assets in business. He didn't let his weakness define him. He turned it into a strength. And then, at just 15 years old, he decided to start a magazine. Student magazine. Everyone told him he couldn't do it. He was too young, too inexperienced. But he had that voice in his head, the one that said, "Just do it." He believed it could be done, so he sat down and did the work. He calculated the costs for printing and paper, figured out the potential income from sales and advertising, and with his friend Johnny, spent 2 years writing hundreds of letters to sell ad space. It was more exciting than his Latin lessons, and when the first check for £250 arrived, it was proof that his belief had paid off. He knew school wasn't his path, so at 16, he left to work on the magazine full-time, camping out in a London basement. Life was chaotic, fun, and free. It felt like a non-stop party, but they worked incredibly hard. He managed to secure interviews with giants like John Lennon and Mick Jagger, giving his small magazine a reputation that rivaled the top publications. They weren't just having fun. They were covering serious issues like the Vietnam War and felt they were making a difference. This is where a core piece of the Branson philosophy comes into focus. Have fun, work hard, and the money will come. He never set out to be rich. He set out to create things, to challenge the status quo, and to enjoy the journey. He found that when he was passionate and having fun, success and money naturally followed. If something ever stopped being fun, he would ask why. And if he couldn't fix it, he'd move on. Life, he believes, is simply too short to be unhappy. His first real money-making ventures were actually failures. At 9 years old, he tried to grow and sell Christmas trees, but rabbits ate all the seedlings. He learned a valuable lesson. Money doesn't, in fact, grow on trees. But he didn't dwell on it. He and his friend had fun shooting the rabbits and sold them to the local butcher, making a small profit after all. Even in failure, there was fun and a lesson learned. From the magazine, the business evolved. They started selling cut-price records by mail order. When a postal strike threatened to shut them down, they didn't give up. They found another way. They opened their first record shop in the spare space of a shoe store and made it the cool place for students to hang out. One store led to another, and soon, before he was even 20, he had a chain of Virgin record stores across the country. The Virgin name itself came from this period. They chose it because they were all complete virgins in business. It was a perfect reflection of their approach, learning as they went, breaking rules, and doing things their own way. One of the best examples of this fun-first philosophy in action is the story of Necker Island. In 1977, needing a break, Branson went to Jamaica, where he had a fantastic time signing nearly 20 reggae bands with a suitcase full of cash, a perfect blend of work and play. While there, he heard about the Virgin Islands and, on a whim, decided to visit. He didn't have much money left, but he'd heard a clever trick. If you pretend you want to buy an island, you get a free helicopter tour. So, he called an estate agent, said he was a record company owner looking to build a studio, and soon he and his girlfriend Joan were being treated like royalty, flying from one stunning island to the next. It started as a game, but then they saw it. Necker, an unspoiled, beautiful island that was miles from anywhere. He fell in love instantly. There was just one problem. The asking price was £3 million. Branson, ever the bold negotiator, offered £150,000. The agent was not amused. His final offer was £200,000, and they were promptly thrown out of their complimentary villa. But the story doesn't end there. On the way home, their flight from another island was cancelled. While everyone else was wandering around lost, Branson saw an opportunity. He chartered a plane for £2,000, did some quick math, and divided the cost by the number of passengers. He grabbed a blackboard and wrote, "Virgin Airways, £39 single flight to Puerto Rico." In that moment of frustration, an airline was born. It was a classic example of his ability to see a solution where others only see a problem, to grab a chance when it appears. And Necker Island? Months later, he found out the owner desperately needed £200,000 to build a house. After some back and forth, he bought the island of his dreams for £180,000, money he didn't actually have but was positive he could find. He borrowed from the bank, from friends, from family, and made his dream a reality. He had fun, he took a chance, and in the end, the money came. This brings us to another key lesson. Be bold, but don't gamble. There's a difference. A gamble is tossing a coin where you have no control over the outcome. A bold move is a calculated risk, where you've weighed the odds, understood the worst-case scenario, and believe you have a good chance of success. The launch of Virgin Atlantic in 1984 was the ultimate bold move. The idea was sparked by that chartered flight, but it was inspired by a childhood hero, Freddie Laker, whose cut-price airline had been driven out of business by the giants. When a proposal to start a new transatlantic airline landed on his desk, he was tempted. His gut instinct told him, within a minute, that this was for him. But he didn't just leap. He calculated the risk. He tried calling a rival cheap airline, People Express, and couldn't get through all day because their lines were constantly busy. He knew instantly he could do better. He then called Boeing and negotiated a deal to rent a single jumbo jet for a year. He presented the idea to his partners at Virgin Music. They thought he was crazy, but he had done the math. The cost, while huge, was less than a third of the music company's yearly profits. If the airline failed completely, they would lose a lot of money, but the parent company would survive. It was a massive risk, but a calculated one. He sought advice from Freddie Laker himself, who warned him about the dirty tricks British Airways would play to crush a competitor. Laker's advice was gold. Don't compete on price alone, offer a better service, and don't forget the fun. Branson took this to heart. Virgin Atlantic was launched not just as a cheap airline, but as an experience. It was fun, it was stylish, and it treated its passengers with respect. And when British Airways did indeed play dirty, trying to ruin his reputation, he remembered Laker's other piece of advice: sue the bastards. He took them to court and won. This relentless drive to challenge himself and take on giants is a recurring theme. The same spirit led him to take on British Rail, launching Virgin Trains after being inspired by the bullet trains in Japan. Again, people said he would fail. And again, he proved them wrong, eventually producing the world's most advanced tilting train. Of course, these bold adventures weren't just in business. For Branson, the ultimate challenge is a physical one, pushing his body and spirit to their absolute limits. His powerboat attempts to cross the Atlantic and win the Blue Ribbon are legendary tales of persistence. On the first attempt, his boat sank just 60 miles from the finish line. He didn't give up. 6 years later, he was back with a new boat. During that second attempt, seawater got into the fuel tanks, and the engines died. The crew was ready to quit. They were exhausted, seasick, and it seemed hopeless. But Branson refused. He rallied them, yelling, "Come on, we've got to do it. Let's try." Somehow, they got the engine started again and, against all odds, beat the record by just over 2 hours. The lesson was burned into his soul. Never, ever give up. It was the day after this victory that a balloonist named Per Lindstrand approached him with an even bigger challenge: cross the Atlantic in a hot air balloon. No one had ever done it before. It was mad, risky, and irresistible. He said yes. Screw it. Let's do it. This is the adventure that left him alone in the sky. After Per jumped, Branson drifted north toward Scotland. But his preparation paid off. His training, his faith in himself, and his refusal to panic allowed him to survive until a rescue helicopter appeared. He had faced death and walked away with even more lessons. Prepare well, have faith in yourself, and help each other. Did that experience stop him? Of course not. A few years later, he and Per decided to cross the much larger Pacific Ocean. This trip was even more harrowing. They were nearly torn apart entering the jet stream, accidentally dropped 2 full fuel tanks, and soared to a terrifying 42,500 feet, where the capsule was in danger of exploding. At one point, fireballs of burning gas began falling around them, and only a quick, desperate maneuver to fly into an oxygen-deprived altitude saved them from incinerating. They finally crash-landed in a blizzard on a frozen lake in the Canadian Arctic, 200 times the size of Britain. As they waited for rescue, suffering from frostbite, Per turned to him and said, "Next time, we'll fly around the world." For Branson, these challenges are the very essence of life. They are what push us to grow. As he says, if you challenge yourself, you will grow. Your life will change. Your outlook will be positive. Underpinning all of this? The The business, the adventures, the risks, is a deep and unwavering belief in the importance of family and friends. He describes Virgin as a big family, and this idea of teamwork and loyalty comes directly from his childhood. When he wanted to buy the old manor house to create his first recording studio, he was £10,000 short. The bank had given him a loan. His parents had given him his trust fund early, but it still wasn't enough. It was his Auntie Joyce, the same aunt who bet him he couldn't learn to swim, who provided the final £7,500. "What's money for anyway?" she told him. "It's to make things happen." It wasn't until years later that he learned she didn't have the money to spare. She had taken out a mortgage on her own home because she had so much faith in him. This loyalty is a two-way street. He believes in being fair in all his dealings and protecting his good name. Early in his career, he made a serious mistake. He devised a scheme to avoid paying tax on records by pretending to export them, a trick he thought was just bending the rules. He got greedy and got caught, ending up in a real prison cell. Lying on a plastic mattress, he felt the full weight of his headmaster's prediction. It was a turning point. He vowed he would never do anything illegal again. His mother put up their family home to pay his bail, and her trust in him, even after he had failed so badly, was a powerful lesson. He paid back every penny of the massive fine and from that day forward, made it a priority to be fair and honest. As he says, "Your reputation is everything." Finally, there is the principle of doing some good. From his earliest days with Student Magazine, he wanted to use his platform to change the world, even in a small way. As his wealth and influence grew, so did his capacity to help. The most dramatic example of this came during the First Gulf War. When Iraq invaded Kuwait, he saw the plight of refugees on the news and called his friend, King Hussein of Jordan, to ask how he could help. He organized a jumbo jet filled with 40,000 blankets and supplies to be flown to Jordan. But he didn't stop there. When he saw that Saddam Hussein had taken British citizens as human shields, he felt he had to do something. Using his unique position as a friend of the Jordanian royal family, one of the few channels of communication Saddam trusted, he orchestrated a mission. He bravely flew into Baghdad, risking his own life and his only airplane, and successfully negotiated the release of the hostages. It was a moment of clarity. He realized that as a businessman, he was in a unique position to connect with people and make a real difference on a global scale. This is the full circle of the screw it, let's do it philosophy. It starts with a personal challenge, builds into bold business ventures driven by fun and passion, is supported by a foundation of family and respect, and ultimately, leads to a life of purpose, where success is used as a force for good. It's a journey from learning to swim in a river to rescuing hostages from a war zone, all guided by the same simple, audacious belief: if you want to do something, just do it. Commentary. As we step back and look at the life of Richard Branson, what is the single, most powerful lesson we can take away from his story? It isn't just about taking risks or starting businesses. It's about a fundamental shift in how you view the world. Most people see a wall and stop. Branson sees a wall and looks for a way over, under, around, or straight through it. His entire life is a testament to the idea that the biggest barriers we face are usually the ones we build in our own minds. That little word, can't, is something he simply doesn't believe in. And what's so powerful about his message, especially for someone your age, is that this isn't a gift you're born with. It's a muscle you build. It started with his mother giving him small challenges, forcing him to rely on himself. He learned to swim by jumping into a river. He started a magazine by writing letters from a school payphone. He started an airline because his flight was canceled. In every case, he took a small, proactive step in the face of a problem. He didn't wait for permission. He didn't wait until he had all the answers. He just did it. The other beautiful lesson here is the role of fun. In our world, we're often taught that work has to be serious, that it has to be a grind. Branson completely rejects this. He built a music empire, an airline, a global brand, all while having the time of his life. He shows us that passion and enjoyment aren't distractions from success. They are the very fuel of it. When you love what you do, you work harder, you're more creative, and you're more resilient when things go wrong. Money, he teaches, is just a byproduct of a life lived with joy and purpose. So, how can you start applying this mindset today? You don't need to cross the Atlantic in a balloon to do it. It starts small. First, find one thing you've been telling yourself you can't do. Maybe it's learning an instrument, trying out for a team, or starting a small project. Break it down into the smallest possible first step. Don't think about the finish line, just take that step. As the ancient philosopher Plato said, the beginning is the most important part of any work. Second, inject fun into your obligations. If you have a task you dread, find a way to make it a game. Put on your favorite music while you study. Turn a chore into a race against the clock. Shift your perspective from "I have to do this" to "I get to see how I can make this enjoyable." It's a small change that can transform your entire attitude. And finally, remember what his Auntie Joyce said, money is for making things happen. You have resources, your time, your energy, your ideas. Use them to make things happen, not just for yourself, but for others. Do some good, even in a small way. Help a friend, volunteer for a cause you care about, or simply be the person who brings a positive attitude to every room you enter. That was a summary of Screw It, Let's Do It by Richard Branson. We've explored the highlights today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary can only ever be a map. The real magic happens when you explore the territory for yourself. It's in the quiet moments, when a particular story or a simple phrase connects with you in a way you didn't expect. This summary is designed to help you decide if this book is worth your time. If anything we've talked about today has sparked something in you, I encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning, it's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see yourself and the world around you. The link to the book is in the description. Also, if you found this summary valuable, I'd be so grateful if you would hit that like button and subscribe to Billionaire's Bookshelf. That way, you won't miss our next journey into another life-changing book. Let's keep challenging ourselves and growing together.